My name is Clara. I'm 41 years old and teach business administration at a university in Denver. For 17 years, my husband Lucas and I had been together. From the outside, we looked like the perfect example of stability. We had a comfortable home in the suburbs, secure careers, and took annual vacations without fail. But beneath that polished picture, cracks had been forming for years, cracks I chose not to look at too closely. That evening, Lucas was in the shower. The hiss of water filled the house, a steady background sound, until something else broke through it. A faint ping from his phone, resting unattended on the nightstand. I'd never been one to snoop. Trust, to me, was sacred. But that night, a sharp, unshakable instinct rose in me, one that makes your pulse quicken before you even know why. My legs carried me toward the phone before my mind could catch up and my stomach tightened. The notification read, "Table for two confirmed at Lumiere, Friday at 7:30 p.m. Window seat as requested. She'll love it." I froze. Lumiere wasn't just any restaurant, it was one of Denver's most exclusive. Years ago, Lucas and I had dreamed of celebrating our 10th anniversary there, but that plan was abandoned because he claimed to have a work trip. I had never stepped foot inside. Now here it was, a reservation made for someone else. I didn't intend to open his phone, but my hand betrayed me. The passcode was still our wedding date, 4 simple numbers. Just as I once believed marriage was simple. What waited behind that lock screen was nothing I could have prepared for. There were messages, photos, and long exchanges going back almost a year, with a woman named Sophie. She was young, blonde, and worked in the communications department at the law firm where Lucas was a partner. Their conversations were constant, not just daily but nearly every hour, about coffee in the morning, the way she wore her hair, the dress she chose for the evening. Images from a 2-day work trip to Santa Fe, Sophie nestled in Lucas's arms, both of them smiling so warmly that I barely recognized the man beside her. The same man who had once stood with me through the 2008 financial crash now looked like a stranger. The air seemed to vanish from the room, replaced by a deafening metallic hum in my ears. Every part of me wanted to hurl the phone across the room, to scream until my throat burned. But I stayed rooted to the spot, my fingers gripping the device so tightly my knuckles whitened, my heartbeat thundering in my chest. From the bathroom, his voice floated out, casual and unsuspecting, "Have you seen my blue tie?" As though nothing had happened. As though he hadn't just shattered the life we'd built with a single dinner reservation, I set the phone back in its place exactly as I had found it, forcing the storm inside me to stay contained. "Second drawer," I answered, my voice cold and flat. That night, I lay in bed with my back to Lucas, listening to the rhythm of his breathing while my own body stayed wound tight, like a bowstring ready to snap. How many times had I told myself his detachment was because of work pressure? How often had I convinced myself not to read into the way he avoided my gaze, offered flimsy excuses for coming home late, or returned smelling faintly of unfamiliar perfume with shirts too crisp to have been worn all day. Now I knew. Every suspicion I'd ever buried, every uneasy instinct I'd tried to silence, had been right. I wasn't the blind wife anymore. The next morning, I kissed him goodbye just like I always did. "Good luck with the Japanese clients today," I said evenly. Lucas nodded, completely oblivious to the fact that I already knew about the candlelit evening he had planned for Sophie on Friday. As soon as the door shut behind him, I reached for my phone and called HR at the university. I asked for a 3-day leave. I didn't need it to weep over what I'd learned. I needed it to prepare. For 17 years, I had played the role of the perfect wife. But now, that version of me was gone. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, staring into it as if it might give me answers, feeling an emptiness where my trust had been. In less than half a day, the life I thought I had was stripped bare. But instead of crumbling, something else began to form inside me, something sharper, calmer, and frighteningly cleared. I didn't want shouting matches or broken dishes. I didn't want to become the woman who throws a fit only to be met with a hollow, "I'm sorry," and a look of pity. No, if Lucas was determined to have a special night with Sophie, then he would have it, just not the way he imagined. I went back into his emails. His calendar was perfectly organized, almost as if he believed it would never be seen by anyone but him. Friday, 7:30 p.m., Lumiere. Notes about the window seat, soft lighting, and wine ordered in advance. A flawless evening for two people who had only one thing in common: both were betraying their spouses. I typed Sophie's name into the firm's employee directory, Sophie Walker, Internal Communications. In under 5 minutes, I had found her on social media. From there, it took only one more click to reach Ethan Walker's profile, her husband, an executive architect at a prominent design firm in downtown Denver. His smile was warm, his eyes kind. I didn't know Ethan, but I knew the sting of betrayal. And I thought, maybe he should know too. But I couldn't just pick up the phone and say, "Your wife is sleeping with my husband." That would be reckless. I needed something smarter, something subtle, believable, and precise. As a lecturer at the university, I had one advantage: I could invite guest speakers to our seminars. And so I began drafting an email, formal, polite, and entirely professional. Dear Mr. Ethan Walker, my name is Clara Whitmore, and I currently teach project management at Metro Denver University. We are organizing a special lecture series on sustainable urban design, and I recently came across your impressive work on the Rivergate Business District. If this interests you, I would like to discuss the possibility of having you as a featured guest speaker. I've arranged a dinner for this Friday at Lumiere, 7:30 p.m., so we can talk through the details. It would be a privilege to meet you there. I pressed send. Less than 2 hours later, Ethan replied. Thank you, Ms. Whitmore. I'm very interested in this opportunity. Friday at 7:30 at Lumiere works perfectly. I look forward to meeting you. I read that line again and again, my heart thudding with a strange combination of anticipation and grief. Ethan had no idea yet. But he would soon, not through rage or public drama, but through a clear, undeniable truth. The next step was the most delicate: securing the table. I called Lumiere directly. Good evening, the hostess greeted warmly. We have a few tables left for Friday, she continued. Do you have a preference? If possible, I'd like a table for two near the window, I said evenly. And, if there's availability, somewhere close to the reservation under Hamilton and Rothman. We're potential business partners and I'd like to be seated nearby. A half-truth, but enough. Certainly, ma'am, she replied. I'll seat you near them. Would you like to request specific wine or menu items? Just a good view, I answered with a faint smile she couldn't see. Friday night. Ethan and I would be seated just a few steps from Lucas and Sophie, close enough to watch every glance, every small touch, close enough to bring the fragile little world they'd built in secret crashing down in one silent moment. Lucas always thought of me as gentle. He was wrong. Friday would make that clear. On the night itself, I arrived at Lumiere 20 minutes early, dressed in a teal silk gown Lucas had once dismissed as too loud for dining out. My hair was swept into a soft bun, my makeup understated, and on my feet were champagne-colored heels I had never worn beyond my closet. Until now. I hadn't dressed to dazzle. I had dressed for war. And tonight, the battlefield was a 5-star restaurant glowing with candlelight, the soft hum of violins, and crystal glasses catching the light. A waiter guided me to my table, a perfect position with a direct line of sight to the window table where Lucas and Sophie would soon sit. They hadn't arrived yet. I settled in, ordering a martini as my chest tightened. Preparation or not, the weight of the moment pressed hard against my ribs. It wasn't fear, it was the awareness that I was finally about to face a truth I had been sidestepping for over a year. Clara Whitmore, a deep, steady voice called from behind me. I turned to see Ethan Walker standing there, tall, dressed in a dark button-down, carrying a polite but slightly cautious smile. He looked almost exactly like the pictures I had seen online, though there was a hint of weariness in his eyes, whether from long hours at work or from the weight of something he didn't yet know was about to unfold, I couldn't say. I'm glad you could make it, I said, rising from my chair to shake his hand. Thank you for accepting the invitation on such short notice. The pleasure's mine, he replied warmly. Your topic really caught my attention. We took our seats, and conversation flowed easily at first: urban design, education, the influence of sustainable architecture on modern cities. I listened, asked questions, and nodded at all the right moments, but my focus kept slipping toward the entrance. And then, they walked in. Lucas, in the gray blazer I'd given him for his birthday the previous year. Sophie, in a fitted red dress that seemed designed to draw every eye in the room. She walked beside him with an effortless confidence, and when Lucas pulled out her chair, they both laughed together as though they were the leads in their own romantic movie. I kept my tone even as Ethan spoke, my fingers tightening around the stem of my glass. Across the room, Lucas leaned closer to Sophie, pouring her wine, his fingertips grazing her wrist in a gesture that looked far too practiced. She tilted her head toward him, candlelight catching on her glittering earrings. Then I reached for my napkin, and my eyes locked with his. Lucas froze. The stem of his wine glass wobbled in his hand, and the waiter had to steady it before it spilled. Sophie followed his gaze and spotted me. Her smile faltered. Without acknowledging them further, I turned back to Ethan and said gently, "Would you excuse me for a moment? I just need to step away." On my way to the restroom, I rehearsed every step in my mind. No melodramatic slap, no raised voice. I wanted the truth. "Sophie, you're Clara, right?" she asked. I nodded. "And you're the one holding my husband's hand under the table, while your husband is sitting less than 10 steps away." "Please, not here," she murmured. "Why not?" I asked, tilting my head slightly, my tone calm but unyielding. "This seems like the perfect place: candlelight, wine, music, the stage is already set for a flawless performance." "I don't need your excuses," I interrupted softly. "But Ethan deserves the truth, doesn't he?" My eyes flicked toward my table, where Ethan was glancing around with a look of growing unease. "He deserves to know exactly who his wife is having dinner with tonight." "Clara, what are you doing here?" Lucas's voice was tight, almost strangled. Ethan approached, his expression focused, his steps deliberate. "What's going on?" he asked. I looked straight into his eyes. "Ethan, this is my husband, Lucas." "And I believe you recognize Sophie, your wife?" Sophie's hand flew to her mouth, eyes brimming with tears. Lucas instinctively stepped back. Ethan turned toward his wife, his face a portrait of hurt and disbelief. I pivoted to leave but paused just long enough to add, in a calm, steady voice, "Oh, and don't worry about the bill. Dinner's still on Lucas. I'm sure his company card is familiar to her." With my head held high, I walked away, leaving behind half-filled wine glasses, unspoken apologies, and 2 people caught in the net of their own betrayal. When I returned to my table after that short but surgical confrontation, Ethan was still standing where I'd left him, staring at Sophie, his hands trembling while Lucas stood beside her, stiff and pale. They both looked like people jolted awake from a sweet dream into a cold, merciless morning. I caught the waiter's attention. "Please," I said quietly but firmly, "I'd like a private room. And, if possible, merge my table with that of Mr. Lucas Hamilton. It seems we have a few matters to discuss." Within minutes, we were being ushered into a discreet private room, soft lighting overhead, the table reset for 4. I sat first, with Ethan beside me. Across from us, Lucas and Sophie took their seats, their posture rigid, like students caught red-handed cheating on an exam. Finally, Lucas spoke. "Clara. I don't even know where to begin." "Start 3 days ago," I said, "when you got that reservation confirmation. The one I saw pop up on your phone. That's when I knew," I continued. Sophie lowered her gaze to the table. Lucas opened his mouth to say something, but I raised my hand to stop him. "I'm not looking for a speech. I read every single message." Lucas. Sophie's voice was faint. I'm sorry." I turned to Ethan. "He's my husband. She's your wife. The least we deserve is honesty, spoken to our faces." Ethan kept his eyes on Sophie, his voice steady but edged with pain. "What are you going to tell me? That it was just a mistake? That you were finding yourself? Because it seems to me you've already found plenty, wrapped around another woman's husband. I never imagined it would get this far. At first, it was nothing more than a silly game. I was feeling empty, unnoticed at home. Lucas, he listened to me. Ethan's voice trembled as he spoke. And I listened to you, too, Sophie. I spent entire weekends rearranging your office, shaping it into the kind of space you said would spark your creativity. I believed every word you told me. Lucas turned toward me, his voice cracking. Clara, I know I've failed you. I've destroyed the most precious thing in my life. Please, please, don't let this be the final chapter for us. I gave him a smile, but it wasn't soft or forgiving. It was the kind of smile a person wears after enduring a long storm, when there's nothing left to lose. Lucas, tonight isn't where this ends. It ended the moment you started looking at Sophie the way you used to look at me. That's when you decided that our wedding vows were just words to be recited, not promises to be honored. His head dropped in shame. Sophie turned away, her shoulders shaking as tears fell freely. Reaching into my purse, I pulled out a hotel key and placed it gently yet firmly on the table. I'll be spending the night at the hotel across the street. The reservation's already made. No surprises here. You're free to go home if you still have the courage. But on Monday morning, when I come back, it would be better if you weren't there. I rose from my seat, smoothing my dress, then turned to Ethan. I'm sorry you had to learn the truth in this way. He gave a slow, pained nod. It hurts, but thank you for being honest. I needed to see it for what it is. I glanced one final time at Lucas and Sophie. I wish you both luck, not because I've forgiven you, but because every choice comes with a price. And sooner or later, everyone has to pay. Without another glance back, I walked out of Lumiere in my hand. I carried a small clutch holding the key to room 1203 at the Celeste Hotel, a suite high above the streets, overlooking a downtown skyline where the lights never fade, even when the heart already has. The front desk clerk welcomed me with a practiced smile, handed me the keycard, and I returned a brief nod. Once inside, I locked the door, set my heels aside, and stepped toward the wide window. The amber glow of the city bathed the glass, casting my shadow across the wooden floor. Outside, the world carried on, but inside, I stood alone, face to face with the truth I could no longer. For the first time in years, I saw myself with absolute clarity. Without Lucas beside me, without his shadow masking the quiet ache I'd carried for so long, I was simply me. I lowered myself onto the edge of the bed, and then the tears came. It wasn't the polished kind of crying you see in films, nor the restrained kind of weeping that slips by unnoticed. It was fierce, grief tangled with fury, raw, jagged, unstoppable. I cried for 17 years of my youth. For the countless nights I sat by the door, waiting. For the lies hidden behind bouquets and bottles of wine. For all the times I convinced myself I was loved, only to learn I'd been slowly replaced by something shinier, younger, more fleeting. I couldn't say how long I stayed like that. The only thing I know is that when the knock came, I was still clutching a pillow, my eyes stinging. I dragged myself to the door and glanced through the peephole. Ethan stood there. I'm sorry to show up like this, he said. I didn't know where else to go. I opened the door wider. Come in. We settled into 2 armchairs by the window. For a while, Ethan didn't speak. I still don't know how you managed to sit through that dinner after knowing everything. He gave a slow nod. Thank you for not letting me go on living in a lie. We spoke like strangers bound by the same wound. He told me Sophie had been the first person to believe in his daring designs, the one he thought truly understood him. I told him Lucas had placed a wedding ring on my finger in the pouring rain, swearing he'd never lose his way. We had both been wrong. I'm going to file for divorce, I said, my voice drained of emotion. Ethan met my gaze without surprise. I don't think I could stay with someone who could pretend like that either. I looked directly into his eyes. I'm not angry at Lucas anymore, not in the way I used to be. Anger burns itself out eventually. But there's one truth I know now. I leaned back slightly, the words steady. I will never again remain in a relationship that wears down my self-respect, piece by piece, until there's nothing left of me. He was silent for a long moment before finally speaking in a low voice. You're stronger than I ever imagined. I shook my head. No. I'm just the last one willing to face the truth. I gave a small nod. Thank you, Ethan. I think tonight you've understood me more than Lucas has in over 10 years. When he left, I stood by the doorway, watching his figure fade into the long corridor until he was gone. I didn't feel powerful at that moment, not in the way people describe. But I felt lighter. As if I'd finally set down a suitcase of stones I'd been dragging for years. Lucas begged for another chance, but the next morning I left the hotel and returned to our house, ready to end what had died long ago. He sat on the couch, disheveled, promising change and saying Sophie was gone. I know, I said. Her coworker told me. She quit and moved back to Santa Barbara, couldn't face the office. Lucas slumped into the couch, face in his hands. You told everyone? Yes, I said. Not for revenge, because I'm done living in the dark. I told them you'd been cheating for a year, hiding behind fake meetings and lies, kissing her while I waited at home. His eyes widened in panic. You've ruined my reputation. I laughed bitterly. You did that yourself. I just stopped hiding it. He stepped toward me, reaching for my hand. Clara, please. Don't do this. I love you. I really do. I stepped back. Love can't survive in lies, Lucas. If you loved me, you wouldn't call her baby while holding me at night. He trembled. It was a mistake. No, it was choice after choice. You never stopped, so now I will. If you leave, you'll ruin my life. No, I said. I'll save mine. I filed for divorce. 3 weeks later, a friend saw Lucas and Sophie at a cafe, without the spark they once had. 2 days later, Lucas sent his last message. I tried to move on with her, but it's gone. She doesn't smile anymore. And I can't find you in her eyes. I didn't reply. Days later, his social media vanished, and he stepped down from the board for personal reasons, leaving the image-obsessed man with nowhere to hide. That spring came early. One bright Saturday, sunlight filled my new apartment as I made coffee and my phone rang. It was Ethan. Coffee at Tanner's? I smiled. 9 to 12. I'm in. Since Lumiere, Ethan and I stayed in touch. Daily texts turned into weekend meetups. That morning, he waited with 2 lattes. Divorce is final, he said. Sophie left a note, sorry for making you lose faith in love. And did you? No. I'm learning again, in small, steady ways. Months passed peacefully. I taught, took a photography class, lived without the label of wife. Ethan spoke at my seminars, never missing one. One evening on my balcony over pizza, I asked, are we changing? No, he said, we're returning to who we are. One summer night by the river, he said, if you ever want to try again, built on trust, honesty, no secrets, I'm ready. I'm not ready for the old kind of love, I said, but maybe I've already started the way you describe. He took my hand gently, no promises, just presence. A year after Lumiere, I attended Professor Benson's retirement. In the ballroom, I saw Lucas, thinner, grayer. He approached, voice rough. I owe you a real apology. I lost more than I thought, self-respect, Sophie, everything. I hope you find peace, I said. And you? Are you okay? Yes. I'm rebuilding on my terms. And I'm not alone. Ethan entered, smiling, that light at the end of the tunnel. Lucas nodded. He's a good man. You deserve a fresh start. I touched my heart. Once shattered, now whole. And so do you, just start again when you're ready not to hurt anyone else.